our scientists will continue to labor after Callisto's civilization shall have disappeared. We think that it will be safe to use your power for the short time necessary to effect a landing. We shall land in a cavern, in a crater already in communication with our city. In that cavern, instructed and aided by some of us, you will build a rocket vessel. No rays can be used because of the Hexans, in which you will be able to travel to a region close enough to your Earth so that you can call for help. You will not be able to carry enough fuel to land there. In fact, nearly all the journey will have to be made without power, traveling freely in a highly elongated orbit around the Sun. But if you escape the Hexans, you should be able to reach home safely, in time. It is for the consideration of this plan that this meeting has been called." "Just one question," Breckenridge spoke. "The Hexans are intelligent. Why are they leaving Europa and Ganymede so unguarded that human beings can move back there and that we can land there all undetected?" "I will answer that question myself," replied King. "Captain Kazov did not quite do justice to his own people. It is true that they are being conquered, but for every human life that is taken, 1,000 Hexans die, and for every human ship that is lost, 20 Hexan vessels are annihilated in return. While the Hexans are masters of rays, the humans are equally masters of explosives and of mechanisms. They can hit a perfect score upon any target in free space, whose course and acceleration can be determined, at any range up to 5,000 kilometers, and they have explosives thousands of times as powerful as any known to us. Ray screens are effective only against rays, and the Hexans cannot destroy anything they cannot see before it strikes them. So it is that all the Hexan vessels, except those necessary to protect their own strongholds, are being concentrated against Callisto. They cannot spare vessels to guard uselessly the abandoned satellites. Because of the enormously high gravity of Jupiter, the Hexans there are safe from human attack, save for ineffectual long-range bombardment. But Io is being attacked constantly, and it is probable that in a few more years Io also will be an abandoned world. Some of you may have received the impressions that the Hexans are to triumph immediately, but such an idea is wrong. The humans can and will hold out for 100 years or more, unless the enemy perfects a destructive ray of the type referred to. Even then, I think that our human cousins will hold out a long time. They are able men, fighters all, and their underground cities are beautifully protected." There was little argument. Most of the auditors could understand that the suggested course was the best one possible. The remainder were so stunned by the unbelievable events of the attack that they had no initiative, but were willing to follow wherever the more valiant spirits led. It was decided that no attempt should be made to salvage any portion of the Arcturus, since any such attempt would be fraught with danger, and since the wreckage would be of little value. The new vessel was to be rocket-driven and was to be built of Callistonian alloys. Personal belongings were moved into lifeboats, doors were closed, and there ensued a painful period of waiting and suspense. The stated hour was reached without event. No Hexan scout had come close enough to them to detect the low-tension radiation of the vital machinery of the Arcturus, cut as it was to the irreducible minimum and quite effectively grounded as it was by the enormous mass of their shielding armor. At a signal from Captain Kazov, the pilot of each lifeboat shot his tiny craft out into space and took his allotted place in the formation, following closely behind the Bazarfk, flying toward Europa, now so large in the field of vision that she resembled more a world than a moon. Captain King, in the Callistonian vessel, transmitted to Breckenridge the route and flight data given him by the navigator of the winged craft. The chief pilot, flying point in turn, relayed more detailed instructions to the less experienced pilots of the other lifeboats. Soon the surface of Europa lay beneath them, a rugged, cratered, and torn topography of mighty ranges of volcanic mountains. Most of the craters were cold and lifeless. but here and there a plume of smoke and steam betrayed the presence of vast, quiescent forces. Straight down one of those gigantic lifeless shafts the fleet of spacecraft dropped, straight down a full 2 miles before the landing signal was given. At the bottom of the shaft a section of the rocky wall swung aside, revealing the yawning black mouth of a horizontal tunnel. At intervals upon its roof were winked into being almost invisible points of light. Along that line of lights the lifeboats felt their way, coming finally into a huge cavern, against one sheer metal wall of which they parked in an orderly row. Roll was called, and the terrestrials walked, as well as they could in the feeble gravity of the satellite, across the vast chamber and into a conveyance somewhat resembling a railway coach, which darted away as soon as the doors were shut. For hundreds of miles that strange tunnel extended, and as the car shot along, door after door of natural rock opened before it, and closed as soon as it had sped through. In spite of the high velocity of the vehicle, it required almost 2 hours to complete the journey. Finally, however, it slowed to a halt, and the terrestrial visitors disembarked at a portal of the Europan city of the Callistonians. "Attention!" barked Captain King. "The name of this city, as nearly as I can come to it in English, is Ruzk. Rusk comes fairly close to it, and is easier to pronounce. We must finish our trip in small cars, holding 10 persons each. We shall assemble again in the building in which we have been assigned quarters. The driver of each car will lead his passengers to the council room in which we shall meet." "Oh, what's the use? This is horrible, horrible! We might as well die!" a nervous woman shrieked and fainted. "Such a feeling is perhaps natural," King went on, after the woman had been revived and quiet had been restored. "But please control it as much as possible. We are alive and well, and will be able to return to Tellus eventually. Please remember that these people are putting themselves to much trouble and inconvenience to help us, desperate as their own situation is, and conduct yourselves accordingly." The rebuke had its effect, and with no further protest, the company boarded the small cars, which shot through an opening in the wall and into a street of that strange subterranean city. Breckinridge, in the last car to leave the portal, studied his surroundings with interest as his conveyance darted through the gateway. More or less a fatalist by nature, and an adventurer, of course, since no other type existed among the older Spacehounds of the IPC, he was intensely interested in every new phase of their experience, and was no whit dismayed or frightened. He found himself seated in a narrow canoe of metal, immediately behind the pilot, who sat at a small control panel in the bow. Propelled by electromagnetic fields above a single rail, upon lightly touching and noiseless wheels, the terrestrial pilot saw with keen appreciation the manner in which switch after switch ahead of them obeyed the impulses sent ahead from the speeding car. The streets were narrow and filled with monorails. Pedestrians pursued their courses upon walks attached to the walls of the buildings, far above the level of the streets. The walls were themselves peculiar, rising as they did, stark, unbroken, windowless expanses of metal, merging into and supporting a massive roof of the same silvery metal. Walls and roof alike reflected a soft yet intense white light. Soon a sliding switch ahead of them shot in, and simultaneously an opening appeared in the blank metal wall of a building. Through the opening the streetcar flew, and as the pilot slowed the canoe to a halt, the door slid smoothly shut behind them. Parking the car beside a row of its fellows, the Callistonian driver indicated that the terrestrials were to follow him, and led the way into a large hall. There the others from the Arcturus were assembled, facing Captain King, who was standing upon a table. "Fellow travelers," King addressed them, "our course of action has been decided. There are 203 of us. There will be 20 sections of 10 persons, each section being in charge of one of the officers of the Arcturus. Dr. Penfield, our surgeon,